He thought I would never find out. While I mourned my late wife, my own son was secretly selling her priceless jewelry. The rain fell steadily against the windows of the old family home as I sat alone in the living room, staring at the framed photograph of my wife, Eleanor. She had been gone for only 3 months. 41 years of marriage had ended with a quiet hospital room, a gentle smile, and her final words. "Promise me you'll keep this family together." I had promised. At the time, I believed it would be difficult because grief changes people. I never imagined betrayal would. Every morning I still brewed 2 cups of coffee before realizing I only needed 1. Every evening I caught myself waiting to hear her footsteps in the hallway. Silence had become the loudest sound in the house. My son, Daniel, visited often after the funeral. At least, that's what I believed. He hugged me, asked how I was doing, brought groceries, and insisted I shouldn't worry about anything. "Dad," he would say with a comforting smile, "Mom wouldn't want you to be alone." Those words made me trust him even more. He had always been ambitious. Too ambitious. As a child, he wanted the newest toys. As a teenager, he wanted the fastest car. As an adult, he wanted success before patience. His mother used to laugh and say, "One day he'll learn that the most valuable things in life aren't things at all." I hoped she was right. One quiet afternoon, I decided to open Eleanor's jewelry cabinet. Not because I wanted to wear my memories. Because I missed touching the little treasures that each carried a story. Her pearl necklace from our 10th anniversary. The sapphire earrings she wore when Daniel graduated from college. The emerald bracelet my father had passed down through generations. But as soon as I unlocked the cabinet, something felt wrong. There were empty spaces. Several velvet boxes were missing. At first, I blamed myself. Perhaps I had moved them after the funeral. Grief clouds the mind. I searched every drawer, every closet, every safe. Nothing. 3 priceless pieces had vanished. I sat down heavily. No, surely Eleanor hadn't hidden them somewhere. She never moved her jewelry without telling me. Never. The next morning I called our longtime family lawyer. "Martin," I asked quietly, "did Eleanor ever give you any of her jewelry before she passed?" There was silence. "No," he replied. "Is something wrong?" I forced a laugh. "No. Probably just my memory." But inside, something cold had settled in my chest. Over the following week, I kept noticing strange things. Daniel visited whenever I left the house. The housekeeper mentioned that he'd asked for the keys to organize some family belongings. I had never given him permission. Then came another surprise. A small antique dealer called me. "Mr. Carter." "Yes, I wanted to verify something." "What is it?" "A young man recently tried to sell an antique silver jewelry box engraved with the initials EC." My heart stopped. Those were Eleanor Carter's initials. What did this young man look like? The dealer hesitated. "I don't want to accuse anyone." "Please." "He looked very much like the gentleman in the family photograph on your mantel." "My son." I thanked him, hung up, and simply stared out the window. For several minutes, I couldn't breathe. Surely there had to be another explanation. Maybe Daniel was storing them. Maybe he'd borrowed them. Maybe. But deep down, I already knew. That evening, Daniel arrived carrying dinner. "Chinese food," he smiled. "Your favorite." I smiled back. "Thank you." We ate together. He laughed, talked about work, discussed investments. Not once did he mention the jewelry. Not once. I looked across the table at the little boy I had once carried on my shoulders. The boy whose bicycle I had taught him to ride. The boy whose scraped knees his mother had kissed better. Where had he gone? After dinner he stood. "I should get going." I nodded. As he reached the door, I asked calmly. "Daniel." He turned. "Yes. If someone betrayed your mother's memory." "What do you mean? What do you think should happen?" He laughed nervously. "I guess they'd deserve whatever comes." "You're probably right." He smiled uncertainly and left. The moment the front door closed, my smile disappeared. The next morning, I visited the antique dealer. He greeted me quietly. Without saying a word, he placed a security photo on the counter. It showed Daniel, holding Eleanor's silver jewelry box, negotiating with a buyer. The timestamp was only 4 days old. I felt as though someone had punched me in the stomach. Still, I didn't confront him. Not yet. Instead, I asked, "Do you still have your surveillance footage?" He nodded. "Of course. I'd like a copy." He handed me a flash drive. I thanked him and walked to my car. For a long time, I simply sat behind the steering wheel. Anger, sadness, disbelief, every emotion fought for control. But then I remembered Eleanor. She had always believed that anger makes people reckless. Justice requires patience, so I made a decision. I would wait, I would learn everything, and when the truth came out, it would come out only once. Over the next month, I quietly hired a private investigator. I never told Daniel. The investigator uncovered something shocking. The jewelry wasn't the only thing disappearing. Family antiques, old watches, rare coins, even paintings from the guest house. Each had been sold through different dealers. Always by someone using cash. Always by Daniel. The total value exceeded 4 crore rupees. I stared at the report in complete silence. This wasn't desperation. This wasn't survival. This was systematic theft. The investigator looked at me sympathetically. I'm sorry. I nodded. Does anyone else know? No. Good. He frowned. You're not going to confront him. I slowly closed the file. No. I have another plan. What kind of plan? I looked out the office window. Daniel had recently announced something exciting. A lavish celebration. His promotion. His new luxury home. Hundreds of guests. Business partners. Friends. Extended family. He wanted everyone to admire the life he'd built. He personally invited me. Dad, he'd said cheerfully, you have to come. It won't be the same without you. I smiled. I wouldn't miss it. He thought I was coming to celebrate. He had no idea. I had already spoken with detectives. And by the time the evening was over, his celebration would become the moment he could never escape. The invitation arrived on heavy ivory cardstock, embossed with gold lettering. Celebrating Daniel Carter's promotion and new beginning. 5-star hotel. More than 300 guests. Business executives, relatives, politicians, and longtime family friends. Daniel had spared no expense. To everyone else, it looked like the celebration of a successful young businessman. To me, it looked like the stage where the truth would finally come to light. I placed the invitation on Eleanor's favorite writing desk and whispered to her framed photograph. I'm sorry it has come to this, but I won't let anyone erase your legacy. Over the next 2 weeks, Detective Sarah Collins contacted me several times. The evidence is getting stronger, she said during one meeting. The surveillance footage from the antique dealer had been verified. Receipts from auction houses matched items reported missing. Bank records revealed large cash deposits made shortly after each sale. Even more disturbing, investigators discovered that Daniel had forged my signature on paperwork claiming he had permission to sell inherited family property. The detective looked at me with sympathy. Mr. Carter, we now have enough evidence to obtain a warrant. I nodded quietly. But not yet. She looked surprised. You want us to wait until the celebration? Why? I took a slow breath. Because he's spent months building a lie in front of everyone who trusts him. They deserve to see the truth the same way they were shown the lie. After a moment, she agreed. Meanwhile, Daniel became even more confident. He called almost every day. Dad, don't forget your suit. Dad, you'll meet my new investors. Dad, everyone's excited to see you. His voice carried excitement. Mine carried calm. You've worked hard, I replied. I'm proud of you. Those words hurt more than he would ever know. The evening of the celebration finally arrived. The ballroom sparkled with crystal chandeliers. Fresh white roses lined the entrance. A string quartet played softly as guests mingled with glasses of champagne. Large screens displayed photographs from Daniel's childhood to his recent achievements. When one image appeared of Eleanor smiling beside him on his college graduation day, my chest tightened. She had loved him with all her heart. If only she knew what he had done. As I entered the ballroom, relatives greeted me warmly. Richard, it's wonderful to see you. You must be proud of Daniel. You raised an incredible son. I forced a polite smile. Thank you. Across the room, Daniel noticed me and hurried over. Dad, he hugged me tightly. You made it. I told you I would. He adjusted my tie and laughed. You look great. So do you. For a brief moment, I almost wished everything I had learned was untrue. Almost. The evening unfolded exactly as Daniel had planned. Guests applauded. Business partners praised his achievements. His fiancée, Emily, stood proudly beside him. She seemed genuinely kind. Watching her smile, I wondered if she knew anything. The investigator believed she didn't. If that was true, another innocent life was about to be shattered. Dinner was served. Music filled the room. People laughed. Daniel walked onto the stage. He tapped the microphone. The room became silent. Tonight, he began, is about family. I felt my heart sink. Everything I've achieved is because of the people who believed in me. The audience applauded. I especially want to thank my father. Spotlights turned toward me. Daniel smiled warmly. He taught me honesty, integrity, and perseverance. For a second, I couldn't move. The irony was almost unbearable. Guests applauded louder. Someone encouraged me to stand. I slowly rose and gave a small nod. Daniel continued. My mother always believed I'd accomplish something meaningful. He looked toward Eleanor's photograph displayed on the giant screen. I hope she's proud. I lowered my eyes. She would have been proud of the son she thought she had raised. Not the man standing before us. As Daniel prepared to continue his speech, I noticed Detective Collins near the entrance. She made brief eye contact. A subtle nod. Everything was ready. I checked my watch. 8:17 p.m. Exactly as planned. Then, the ballroom doors opened. The music stopped. Every conversation ended. 4 detectives entered calmly, dressed in formal jackets with official identification clearly visible. The room fell completely silent. Daniel looked confused. His smile faded. He glanced toward me, then back at the detectives. One of them approached the stage. Mr. Daniel Carter. Daniel forced a nervous laugh. Yes, I'm Detective Sarah Collins. She held up a document. We have a warrant for your arrest on charges including theft, fraud, trafficking stolen property, and forgery. The microphone amplified every word. A gasp swept through the ballroom. Emily stepped backward in shock. What? Daniel stammered. There has to be some mistake. There isn't. The detective continued calmly. We also have evidence connecting you to the sale of multiple family heirlooms belonging to your late mother. Daniel's face turned pale. He slowly looked toward me. For the first time that evening, he realized I already knew. His confident expression disappeared. Dad. I didn't answer. He climbed down from the stage and walked toward me. Dad, tell them. His voice trembled. This is a misunderstanding. I met his eyes. For weeks I had imagined this moment. I thought I would feel anger. Instead, I only felt heartbreak. Quietly, I reached into my jacket pocket. I removed a small velvet jewelry box. It was Eleanor's. Inside was the single ring I had hidden before anyone else could take it. I held it in my hand. This, I said softly, is the only piece of your mother's collection you never found. Daniel stared at it in silence. You sold everything else. His lips quivered. I interrupted. You didn't just steal jewelry. You stole memories. You stole promises. And worst of all, you stole from the woman who loved you more than anyone else ever could. The room was silent. Some guests had tears in their eyes. Emily covered her mouth, unable to believe what she was hearing. Daniel dropped to his knees. Dad, I'm sorry. But the detective stepped forward. One officer gently placed handcuffs on his wrists. The metallic click echoed through the ballroom. Daniel began crying. Not the tears of a little boy. The tears of a man who had finally run out of lies. As the detectives led him toward the exit, he looked back one last time. Dad, please. I closed my eyes. The hardest lesson a parent can ever learn is that love does not erase accountability. Sometimes, the greatest act of love is allowing your child to face the consequences of their choices. The ballroom remained frozen in silence long after the detectives escorted Daniel out. No one spoke. No one knew what to say. The celebration that had been planned for months had ended in less than 10 minutes. Guests quietly gathered their belongings and left, whispering to one another as they disappeared into the night. Emily stood alone near the stage, her engagement ring trembling in her hand. She walked toward me with tears streaming down her face. Mr. Carter. I looked at her. Did you know? I slowly shook my head. No, I believed he had earned everything he owned. She covered her mouth. He told me the family heirlooms had been given to him by your wife before she passed away. I closed my eyes. He lied to both of us. Emily removed her engagement ring. I don't even know who I was going to marry. Without another word, she placed the ring on the table and walked away. The next morning, every local newspaper carried the same headline. Business executive arrested during his own celebration. Television stations replayed videos recorded by guests. Within hours, Daniel's company suspended him. Business partners canceled contracts. His reputation, built over years, collapsed in a single night. But none of that brought me peace. I hadn't wanted revenge. I had wanted the truth. A week later, Detective Sarah Collins called. Mr. Carter, we've discovered something new. I met her at the police station. She placed several folders on the table. We searched Daniel's office and a storage unit he rented under another name. What did you find? She opened the first folder. Inside were photographs of dozens of valuables. Silverware, antique clocks, paintings, family documents, many belonged to my late wife. But one photograph made my heart stop. It showed Eleanor's wedding necklace. The one she wore on the happiest day of our lives. I thought it had been sold. So did we, Sarah replied. It wasn't. She slid another photograph across the table. The necklace was locked inside a private vault. He kept the most valuable pieces hidden. I stared at the picture. Why would he keep some and sell others? Sarah answered before I could ask. We believe he intended to sell them later through an international collector. My hands trembled. Even after everything, there had been more. The investigation continued. Financial experts uncovered millions in hidden transactions. Daniel hadn't stolen because he needed money. He had stolen because he wanted a lifestyle beyond what he could honestly afford. Luxury cars, designer watches, private club memberships, expensive vacations, every extravagant purchase had been funded by selling pieces of his mother's legacy. The court hearings began 2 months later. The courthouse was crowded with reporters. When Daniel entered wearing a plain suit instead of his tailored designer clothes, he looked years older. He avoided my eyes. The prosecutor presented overwhelming evidence. Security footage, auction records, bank statements, forged signatures, witness testimony. Then it was my turn. I walked slowly to the witness stand. The courtroom became silent. The prosecutor asked gently, "Mr. Carter, why didn't you confront your son when you first discovered the theft?" I took a deep breath. Because I wanted certainty, and after you became certain, I wanted justice, not revenge. I shook my head. If I wanted revenge, I would have humiliated him immediately. I looked toward Daniel. I waited because I hoped he would tell the truth himself. Daniel lowered his head. He couldn't look at me. The prosecutor held up Eleanor's photograph. What did these items mean to your wife? I smiled sadly. They weren't just jewelry. They were memories. The pearl necklace celebrated our 10th anniversary. The sapphire earrings marked our son's graduation. The emerald bracelet belonged to my grandmother. Every piece carried the story of someone she loved. The courtroom fell silent. Several jurors wiped away tears. When the defense lawyer questioned me, he asked, "Mr. Carter, do you still love your son?" I didn't hesitate. Yes. The lawyer looked surprised. Even after everything, I'll always love him. I paused before adding, but love doesn't erase responsibility. If parents excuse every wrong choice, they don't protect their children. They teach them that consequences don't exist. The judge called for a recess. As I stepped into the hallway, someone quietly spoke behind me. "Dad." I turned. Daniel stood there with his attorney. He looked exhausted. "I know you don't owe me anything." I remained silent. He swallowed hard. "I kept telling myself I'd replace everything before you noticed. But then I needed more money. So I sold another piece. And another. I convinced myself I could fix it." He wiped away tears. Then I couldn't stop. I listened without interrupting. "I betrayed Mom." His voice broke. "I betrayed you." For the first time since Eleanor's funeral, I saw not the confident businessman, but the frightened little boy who had once cried after breaking a window with a baseball. Back then, admitting the truth had been enough. This time, it wasn't. "I forgive you, Daniel." His eyes widened. But forgiveness isn't the same as freedom from consequences. Tears rolled down his face. "I understand." The trial was nearing its end. The evidence was overwhelming, and the outcome seemed inevitable. But before the judge announced the sentence, one final witness was called. It was the manager of the private vault. He carried a sealed evidence box. Inside was Eleanor's wedding necklace, along with several other heirlooms that investigators had recovered. Seeing them again filled the courtroom with emotion. The prosecutor gently placed the necklace on the evidence table. "For the Carter family," he said, "these items represent far more than their monetary value." I looked at the necklace and remembered Eleanor's smile on our wedding day. Some things can be recovered. Some cannot. And trust, once broken, is the hardest treasure of all. The courtroom was silent as the judge adjusted his glasses and looked over the thick stack of documents before him. Every person in the room seemed to stop breathing. Daniel stood beside his attorney, his shoulders slumped, his eyes fixed on the floor. The confident businessman who had once walked into boardrooms believing he could solve every problem was gone. Only a broken son remained. The judge finally spoke. "Mr. Daniel Carter, this court has carefully reviewed the evidence, the testimony of the witnesses, and the statements made by both the prosecution and the defense." He paused. "You were trusted with preserving your late mother's legacy. Instead, you abused that trust. You forged documents, sold family heirlooms for personal gain, deceived those closest to you, and continued these actions over an extended period. The silence became even heavier. However, the judge looked toward me. The court also recognizes that your father has cooperated fully with investigators while showing remarkable restraint throughout this painful process. He turned back to Daniel. You have accepted responsibility for your crimes and assisted authorities in recovering the remaining stolen property. For that reason, your sentence reflects both punishment and the opportunity for rehabilitation. Daniel closed his eyes. I hereby sentence you to 5 years in prison, with eligibility for parole according to the law. You are further ordered to pay full restitution for every item that cannot be recovered. The gavel struck. The sound echoed through the courtroom. It was over. As deputies prepared to escort Daniel away, he turned toward me. Dad, his voice barely rose above a whisper. May I speak with him? The judge nodded. You have 5 minutes. The courtroom slowly emptied until only the two of us remained. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Finally, Daniel looked at me. I don't expect forgiveness anymore. I gave a faint smile. I already told you. I forgive you. He shook his head. I don't deserve it. Perhaps not. But forgiveness isn't earned. It's given. Fresh tears filled his eyes. I kept thinking success meant having more. Bigger house. Better car. More money. I never realized I already had everything that mattered. I reached into my coat pocket. The small velvet jewelry box was still there. I opened it and showed him his mother's wedding ring. This is all I kept hidden. He stared at it silently. Do you remember what your mother always said? A faint smile crossed his face through the tears. Character is worth more than anything money can buy. That's right. I gently closed the box. You lost your reputation. You lost your career. You lost years of your life. But if you learn from this, you don't have to lose your character forever. Daniel began crying openly. I'm so sorry, Dad. So am I. The deputies quietly approached. Daniel looked at me one last time before being led away. I love you. I love you too, son. Those were the last words we spoke that day. Over the following months, life slowly found a new rhythm. Most of Eleanor's jewelry was recovered. The pieces that had already been sold at auction were impossible to retrieve, but the restitution ordered by the court allowed me to establish something far more meaningful. With the recovered funds, I created the Eleanor Carter Memorial Scholarship. Each year, it would help students who had lost a parent pursue their education. I wanted my wife's legacy to be measured not by diamonds or gold, but by hope. At the scholarship's first award ceremony, I stood before a room full of young people. Holding Eleanor's photograph, I said, my wife believed the greatest inheritance we leave behind isn't wealth. It's kindness. It's honesty. It's the choices we make when no one is watching. The audience applauded. For the first time since her passing, I felt she would have smiled. 3 years later, I received a handwritten letter. The return address was from the correctional facility. It was from Daniel. Dear Dad, every day I think about Mom. Every day I think about the choices I made. Prison gave me something success never did. Time to face myself. I've completed courses in financial ethics and counseling. I now mentor younger inmates, warning them how greed destroys lives. I know I can never undo what I did. But I promise that if I'm given another chance, I'll spend the rest of my life earning back trust instead of chasing money. Thank you for loving me enough to let me face the consequences. Love, Daniel. I folded the letter carefully. There was no guarantee the future would be easy. Trust, once broken, takes years to rebuild. Sometimes a lifetime, but for the first time in years, I believed rebuilding was possible. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, I visited Eleanor's grave. The autumn breeze gently moved the flowers planted around the headstone. I placed a single white rose beside her name. Then I spoke softly. I kept my promise. I protected our family. It wasn't the way either of us wanted. But I hope you'd understand. The wind rustled through the nearby trees. In that peaceful moment, I remembered something Eleanor had once told me after Daniel was born. Our job as parents isn't to make sure our children never fall. It's to make sure they know how to stand back up after they've fallen. I smiled through my tears. Daniel had fallen farther than either of us could have imagined. Now, the choice to stand again was his. As I walked away from the cemetery, I realized something important. Jewelry can be stolen, money can disappear, reputations can crumble overnight, but truth has a way of finding its moment. And when it finally does, no lie, no matter how carefully hidden, can stand against it. The world had moved on, but some wounds healed more slowly than others. On a cool October morning, I stood at the front gate of the correctional facility, waiting. The heavy steel doors opened. Daniel stepped outside carrying a single duffel bag. His hair had begun to gray, and the confidence that once bordered on arrogance had been replaced by quiet humility. He spotted me. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he slowly walked toward me. "Dad," I smiled gently. "Welcome home, son." Tears filled his eyes. You came." I said I would." He lowered his head. "I didn't deserve that." "Perhaps not," I replied. "But everyone deserves the chance to become better than they were yesterday." The drive home was mostly silent. Daniel looked out the window at familiar streets that suddenly felt unfamiliar after 5 years away. "So much has changed," he whispered. "Yes," I said, "but some things never do." When we reached the house, he stopped in the driveway. "It looks exactly the same." "It does." He hesitated before walking to the front door. Inside, everything remained as Eleanor had left it. Her favorite piano, the family photographs, the old grandfather clock. Daniel's eyes rested on his mother's portrait. He walked over slowly. "I'm sorry, Mom." His voice cracked. "I wish I could tell you that in person." Over the next several months, Daniel worked hard to rebuild his life. He accepted a modest job at a local community workshop instead of chasing high-paying executive positions. He volunteered at the scholarship foundation created in Eleanor's name, helping students learn about financial responsibility and ethical decision-making. Whenever he spoke to young people, he never hid his past. "I made one dishonest choice," he would tell them. "Then another, and another, until I became someone I no longer recognized. If you think one lie doesn't matter, trust me, it can change your entire life." His honesty touched many lives. One afternoon, a young scholarship recipient approached him. "My father passed away last year," she said softly. "I almost gave up on college. But this scholarship changed everything." "Thank you." Daniel smiled through tears. "Don't thank me. Thank my mother. Her legacy is the reason you're here." That evening, we visited Eleanor's grave together for the first time since his release. Daniel placed a bouquet of white lilies beside the headstone. He knelt quietly. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," he whispered. "I'm asking you to be proud of the man I'm trying to become." The wind gently rustled the trees. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Finally, I placed my hand on his shoulder. "Your mother always believed people could change." He looked at me. "Do you?" I smiled. "I wouldn't be standing here if I didn't." Months later, Daniel was invited to speak at a charity gala supporting families who had lost loved ones. Standing at the podium, he looked across the audience. "I once believed success meant owning expensive things," he began. "But the most valuable treasures in life are trust, love, and family. I lost all three. Getting them back has been the hardest journey of my life." The audience stood and applauded. Among them were students whose lives had been changed by the Eleanor Carter Memorial Scholarship. In that moment, Daniel understood something he never had before. His mother's greatest inheritance had never been her jewelry. It had been her values. And those values would shine far longer than any diamond ever could. Nearly a year after Daniel returned home, life had settled into a quiet routine. The house no longer felt empty. The laughter wasn't as frequent as it had been when Eleanor was alive, but it had returned. One rainy afternoon, I decided to clean the attic. Dust covered old boxes that hadn't been opened in decades. Inside one wooden chest, I found Eleanor's favorite blue sweater, our old photo albums, and a small envelope with my name written across the front in her elegant handwriting. "For Richard, only if you ever feel our family is falling apart." My hands trembled. I carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a letter. "My dearest Richard, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer beside you. I know you'll blame yourself for things that were never yours to carry. Please don't. If Daniel ever loses his way, don't stop loving him. But don't protect him from the consequences of his choices either. Real love doesn't rescue people from every mistake. It helps them become strong enough to face them. Treasures can be replaced. Character cannot. Promise me that whatever happens, you'll choose truth over comfort. And if our son ever finds his way back, welcome him home. Love always, Eleanor." By the time I reached the last line, tears blurred my vision. She had written those words years before her illness. Almost as if she had known. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back inside the envelope. That evening, Daniel returned from work. He immediately noticed my red eyes. "Dad, is everything okay?" Without saying a word, I handed him the letter. He read it slowly. Halfway through, he broke down. When he reached the final sentence, he covered his face with both hands. She still believed in me. I nodded. She never stopped. Daniel cried harder than I had ever seen. I spent years chasing money. And Mom spent her whole life teaching me something money could never buy. He looked at me. I failed her. You disappointed her, I said gently. But failing isn't the end. Refusing to change would have been. The following weekend, Daniel made an unexpected decision. He called every antique dealer, auction house, and collector involved in the investigation. Whenever possible, he personally bought back pieces of family history that had been legally resold. Some collectors refused. Others, after hearing the story, sold the items back at the original price. One elderly collector returned Eleanor's pearl necklace without accepting a single rupee. It belongs with the family, he said. Months later, almost every recovered heirloom had been returned to the old oak cabinet. For the first time since Eleanor's passing, the cabinet looked nearly complete. Daniel stood quietly in front of it. I used to see expensive jewelry. He smiled sadly. Now I see birthdays, anniversaries, family dinners, and Mom's smile. I placed my hand on his shoulder. That's what she always hoped you'd see. On the anniversary of Eleanor's passing, our entire family gathered at the house. The scholarship recipients came, neighbors came, old friends came. Instead of mourning what had been lost, we celebrated the lives that had been changed because of her legacy. Daniel stepped forward to address everyone. My mother left behind beautiful jewelry. He paused. But that was never her greatest treasure. He looked at me. Her greatest treasure was teaching us that honesty is worth more than gold, forgiveness is stronger than anger, and family is built on trust. The room erupted in applause. As I looked at Eleanor's smiling portrait above the fireplace, I couldn't help but whisper. We did it. The family had been broken. The truth had hurt. Justice had been served. And, in time, love had helped us rebuild. The old Carter family home still stood at the end of Maple Street, surrounded by the oak trees Eleanor had planted decades earlier. Time had changed many things. My hair had turned completely white. Walking required a cane. The house was quieter than it used to be. But it was no longer lonely. Daniel had kept his promise. He rebuilt his life one honest day at a time. No shortcuts, no lies, no stolen success. Instead of chasing wealth, he dedicated himself to helping families recover from financial fraud and teaching young entrepreneurs that integrity is the foundation of every lasting achievement. People no longer remembered him only as the man who was arrested. They remembered him as the man who admitted his mistakes and spent years making them right. One autumn afternoon, Daniel arrived with exciting news. Dad, he said, smiling, the city council approved it. I looked up from my newspaper. Approved what? He handed me a brochure. Across the front were the words, the Eleanor Carter Family Resource Center. I looked at him in surprise. What is this? He sat beside me. We're turning the old community building into a center for grieving families. There will be counseling, legal guidance, financial education, and scholarships. For anyone who needs a fresh start. I couldn't speak. He continued, I wanted Mom's name to mean hope. Just as tears filled my eyes, there was a knock at the door. Outside stood dozens of former scholarship recipients. Doctors, teachers, firefighters, engineers, nurses, business owners. Each one carried a single white rose. One by one, they entered the house. A young doctor stepped forward. I lost my father when I was 16. The Eleanor Carter Scholarship kept me in school. A teacher smiled. It helped me become the first college graduate in my family. Another woman held her young daughter. Without your wife's kindness, I wouldn't have the life I have today. The living room filled with gratitude. I looked at Eleanor's portrait above the fireplace. Her smile seemed brighter than ever. A week later, the resource center officially opened. Hundreds of people attended the ceremony. A bronze plaque stood near the entrance. It read, in loving memory of Eleanor Carter. She believed kindness was life's greatest inheritance, honesty its strongest foundation, and family its greatest treasure. The mayor invited Daniel to speak. He walked to the podium, paused for a moment, and looked out at the crowd. Years ago, he began, I believed success meant having more than everyone else. I was wrong. I lost almost everything because of my own greed. But my father taught me that facing the truth is the first step toward redemption. And my mother, he looked toward the plaque, taught me that love doesn't disappear when someone makes a terrible mistake. It waits for them to find their way home. The audience rose to their feet in a long-standing ovation. That evening, after everyone had gone home, Daniel and I sat together on the porch. The sun slowly disappeared behind the trees. "Dad," he asked quietly, "do you think Mom would be proud now?" I smiled. I think she never stopped believing this day would come. He nodded silently. For several minutes, we watched the sunset without speaking. Finally, I looked at him. "Remember something, son. Jewelry can be stolen, money can be lost, even trust can be broken. But a person who truly changes can become a blessing to others." Daniel smiled through tears. "I'll spend the rest of my life proving that." I reached over and squeezed his shoulder. "I know you will." As the evening sky turned golden, I realized Eleanor's greatest legacy had never been locked inside a jewelry cabinet. It lived in every honest choice, every act of forgiveness, every life changed for the better. And that legacy would continue long after all of us were gone. 20 years had passed since the night detectives walked into Daniel's celebration. The story that had once filled newspaper headlines had become a lesson told in business schools and community programs, not because of the crime, but because of what happened afterward. I was 84 now. Walking had become slower, and my hearing wasn't what it used to be. But every Sunday, my family gathered at the old Carter house. One afternoon, Daniel arrived with his 12-year-old son, Ethan. "Dad," Daniel said with a smile, "Ethan has something to ask you." The boy stepped forward shyly. "Grandpa, Dad says Grandma Eleanor was the strongest person he ever knew." I smiled. "He told you that?" Ethan nodded. "He also said he made a big mistake a long time ago." Daniel looked down quietly. He had never hidden the truth from his son. "I want to know about her," Ethan said. Instead of answering immediately, I stood and walked slowly to the old jewelry cabinet. I unlocked it. Inside rested the few family heirlooms we had recovered over the years. I carefully removed Eleanor's pearl necklace. "This necklace isn't valuable because it's made of pearls," I said. "It's valuable because your grandmother wore it the day your father graduated from college." Then I picked up the emerald bracelet. "This belonged to your great-grandmother. It has been in our family for more than 70 years. Finally, I held up Eleanor's wedding ring. "This is the most precious treasure in our family." Ethan looked surprised. "It doesn't have the biggest diamond." I smiled. "No, but your grandmother wore it every day because it reminded her that love isn't measured by money." Daniel quietly wiped away a tear. That evening, after Ethan had gone to play outside, Daniel sat beside me on the porch. I used to hope he'd never learn what I did. I looked at him. Now I hope he learns from it." I nodded. "That's how mistakes become wisdom." Several weeks later, Ethan's school announced an essay competition. The topic was, "What is the greatest treasure?" When the winners were announced, Ethan came running through the front door waving a certificate. "Grandpa, I won." He handed me the essay. It read, "Some people think treasure is gold, money, or jewelry. My family taught me something different. The greatest treasure is trust. If you lose money, you can earn it again. If you lose jewelry, you might replace it. But if you lose someone's trust, it takes years to earn it back." My great-grandmother left behind jewelry. My grandfather lost it. Then he spent the rest of his life proving that honesty is worth more than diamonds. That's the treasure I want to inherit. By the time I finished reading, tears were rolling down my cheeks. Daniel stood silently in the doorway. "I never imagined," he whispered, "that something so painful could become something so meaningful." I folded the essay carefully. "That's because your mother's legacy was never about the jewelry. It was about what people learned because of it." On Eleanor's birthday that year, our entire family gathered at the memorial garden behind the Carter Family Resource Center. Children laughed among the flowers. Former scholarship recipients brought their own families. The center had now helped thousands of people rebuild their lives. A new bronze statue of Eleanor stood in the middle of the garden. At its base were her favorite words, "Choose truth, even when it costs you everything." Daniel held Ethan's hand as we placed white roses beneath the statue. The three generations stood together in silence. Then Ethan looked up at his father. "Dad, yes, when I'm older, I want people to remember me the way they remember Grandma." Daniel smiled. "Then live the way she lived." As the sun began to set, I realized my promise to Eleanor had finally been fulfilled. Our family had been broken by greed, restored by truth, and united forever by forgiveness.